Hey everyone, and welcome to the Unmodern Podcast, the podcast where we have unscripted, unapologetic, and uncomfortable conversations that affects everyday people. If you've ever had an outlook, thought, or an opinion that modern day society told you to be silent on, that you would get in trouble for, or if you've ever heard the words, probably shouldn't say that, then this is the podcast for you. My name is Alfred, a husband, father, and an adventure-seeking kind of guy who over the years has learned to have a positive outlook on life, regardless of what society throws at me. So if you're ready to listen, let's go. Mr. Mike Prince, welcome to the Unmodern Podcast, dude. I appreciate you, dude. You're a huge part of my story, a huge part of my current growth, probably the person I relate to the most about positive strides I've made in my life. I can't wait to have this jam session with you, man. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, brother. It's an absolute honor to be one of the guests on the first. I think you're in the first 5 episodes still. So super stoked. I listened to the first one. I've dived into some of the other ones, and oh man, we've had so much growth, and our journey together has been amazing. So I've been excited and pumped for this chat.
I can't wait for people to hear your story. Obviously, your story resonated with me. That's why we're here, closer than we ever have been, chatting basically every day. Our story started off pretty uniquely. I'm going to let you get into a quick intro here, talk about your journey, where we came from, where we aligned with flyboarding, and that whole, I don't want to say counterculture movement, but really just off the beaten path. You know, when people hear the term flyboarding, they don't even know what we're talking about. And man, it was some of the best times of my life, dude. But it's funny, I can't imagine living that lifestyle now. It doesn't compute in my brain. The alcohol, the sleepless nights, the buffoon attitude and behaviors, it's something that doesn't align anymore. But I'm also very appreciative that I was able to do that. I'm definitely no regrets around it. It's just kind of have evolved and moved on. But I'd love for you to give people kind of your backstory, especially you can kind of touch on how you ended up in the space of breath work, mindfulness, maturity, growth. I mean, we can go on and on about these words that describe it, but there was really a pivotal moment, and I want you to describe it in your own words. You know, what changed for you going from that living your best life, party mentality, to really being the best version of yourself that you can envision? I want people to hear that story.
Yes. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. And I can take it back to a little bit about flyboarding. And I love that you bring that up, that, you know, there's such contrast in that time in our lives, right? Let's be real, we had massive egos at the time. We were doing something that most people had never heard of. In the athletic space, I had the opportunity. Well, you traveled as well, but you know, I was traveling the world, doing shows, putting it all out on social media. It was cool. We were cool. We were riding a wave that was incredible, and there was no slowing us down, right? But as you say, like, we weren't I don't know if we were or not typical athletes, but let's just say there's times we were taking care of our bodies, and there was times we weren't. But we certainly weren't as conscious and present as we could have been. And it was not a sustainable lifestyle, right? But when I look at parts of it that drove me and got me to where I am today, man, did it open my world up. I was working for a massive software company at the time when I found flyboarding. And I remember a year or two in, I quit everything to say, I'm going on the road to commit to this. And that wasn't even the business side yet. That was, I'm going to go to the US. I'm going to sleep on people's couches to train, because I didn't have my own gear, nor did I have the financial means to create it and buy it. So that's what I chose to do. Then I ended up learning the business side, wanting to do that, and went that way. But let's fast forward a little bit through that journey of ego. You know, when the dust settled and the brotherhood wasn't there anymore, and I went back to my corporate job, I was making good money. We just bought a house. I have a beautiful wife. We had just had our second child. From a in-the-box perspective, as society defines success and what's going to bring us happiness, I should have been happy. But looking back on it all, you know, I didn't know it at the time, but I was feeling a lull from that athletic journey, from the flyboard world, that I no longer had anymore. I didn't have eyes looking at me. I didn't have exciting stuff to share on social media. I didn't have the same brothers next to me all the time to work through and support me. So I was standing there in a world that I'd created all these material things, but really I was drinking a little too much. I didn't feel fulfilled inside at all. I felt very empty and lonely, and I didn't know where to turn. I remember the pivotal time for me was actually standing in our new house in our driveway. I was shoveling the driveway and looking around. I don't know what hit me, but looking around and saying to myself, I'm standing in my worst nightmare. And we're a month after buying a brand new house. Like everything is amazing, apparently. But for me, my biggest fear in my life is being comfortable. And I had gotten comfortable. I put myself in a position where I had a mortgage now. I had all these bills. I had kids. I had blah, 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 blah. But I didn't have anything I was connecting to inside, a purpose, something that was driving me. I was just simply drinking on the weekends or sometimes maybe even during the week just to feel anything, and I was looking for people around me to do that with, to make it okay. Or I was putting in way too many hours at work thinking it's okay because I'm producing financially. So that's where I started to say, okay, this can't be it. There has to be something more in this life than just making this money, paying these bills, and looking for escapism on the weekends. And I can continue that journey with somebody Cam McDougall. He was a good friend of mine at the time. For years prior, I'd watched him do this crazy shift in life where I was like, man, he's really committed to this health journey. But it's funny, I had reached out to him to try to help somebody else in the health and wellness space, to say she wants to look at your program and see what you're doing and what you did to get to where you are. And he simply asked me a question that most men do not ask themselves, or to ask each other, not with any real intentionality and wanting to hear the answer anyway. And that's, how are you? And not high five, yeah, how are you? The Bills did great on the weekend, blah, blah, blah. He listened and he asked me again. He said, no, really, how are you doing, man? And I don't know what the bridge was, where it was to open that door for me to actually feel comfortable and step inside it. But I really opened up to him. And I said, man, I don't really know. I'm not feeling the greatest lately. I'm feeling kind of in the dark. I'm feeling X, Y, and Z. So we're still in the beginning of the journey here. I hope it's okay that I'm rambling, but this is the story. And so I ended up working with Cam. I ended up getting my shit together and at least finding a place where I knew my nutrition was important. And I was an athlete. I'd done it before, but I was dropped my ego, listened to him. And the new realm that came in with Cam is he talked about the 5 bodies, not just the physical, the nutritional and those pieces, right? But connecting the body, mind, and the spirit. Okay, so really bringing in the element of spirit and bringing in a tool which I had never experienced at the time, which is breath work. Okay, and I played a little bit with cold exposure already because of our big man Wim, and Cam was doing that as well. And so I got myself within a matter of 4 months, I'd lost 30 pounds. I'd stopped the drinking. I was in peak shape, like the most fit I've been, I could say, in my entire life, even in the athletic journey, because I was body, mind, and spirit connected, taking care of myself, and started to look at parts of myself that I had never looked at, my shadows, right? And for anybody that doesn't know where that is, those are the dark places that we try to hide from the rest of the world that generally aren't the most positive. So I got to this place in the spring feeling amazing. And here we get to the pivotal part of the story where I started to feel pain in my joints, in my wrists. My hands were swollen. My feet were swollen. I couldn't fit them in my gym shoes. I was still showing up, though. Everything started to get very, very, very sore. As doctors do, they send you for blood tests, x-rays, blah, 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 so on and so forth. I went for months of this testing, and eventually I hired a naturopath, and I said, I don't know what to do anymore. I'm in a lot of pain. This is not in my head. Look at everything. It's swollen. And long story short, we sent away for a private testing I had to pay for to really dive deep. And I had Lyme disease. I had about 4 or 5 different diseases from a tick that when I tracked it back, I'd cut down 6 massive trees in our backyard that March. And this was, 5 months later. And so, to continue that a little bit, essentially, I didn't change much at that time because I was told it's in its early stages. Take these antibiotics, you'll be good. And I remember, and I'm going to sell myself out on this one. Because I remember on my birthday this year, even still asking my naturopath, is it okay if I take a day off of my antibiotics to drink on my birthday? Because I had a big event planned. Literally makes me sick to my stomach that I asked this. That's who I was. That was still that important to me at that time. But I did. And she said, yeah, not a big deal. It's the cycle, you'll be fine. Ugh, gets me. Anyways, months down the road, cycles of antibiotics. I was smart enough to be taking a break in between them and repairing my gut at the time, but not smart enough to be stopping drinking completely. They didn't work. All antibiotics did was tear my body apart. They took me from 95 pounds down to 165 pounds. I'm 6'1", so I was really, really thin. I was frail. All the diseases continued to attack my body. I was crying through the night because I was in so much pain. There was nothing that could stop it. I couldn't lift my little kids up without being in excruciating pain. Ultimately, for me, the biggest hit was to my pride as a man, or what we define as a man. And I don't know, I always kept having this thought of if we were in the street and we didn't go out as a family much downtown in dangerous areas or anything, but this is the way we think, I could never protect my family. I am so frail that I can't shovel the driveway right now anymore. I can't take the garbage out. I was in so much pain and I didn't know what to do. So that December, a friend had shared with me someone who had worked with a medicine called Kambo, and that there was this shaman down in Vancouver that had helped some people. So I looked her up. I called her, not knowing where else to turn. And she said, I'm booked for months out. Like, I have my regulars, I have other people that come. But then she said, listen, I can see we really need to connect. I can feel we really need to connect. And she cleared a space for me. It was 3 days to go down and sit with the medicine once a day for 3 days in a row. I didn't even know. I'd never, played with psychedelics. I'd never played with any medicine other than when I was a kid, to trip out and do the thing that we all do and experiment. So this was a complete shift for me, not only to drive the Coquihalla, aka Highway to Hell, December 18th, being frail as anything. If I had ever got sidetracked, and that's honestly the worst I've ever seen in my life. There's such a metaphor there of I was literally in my own personal hell, internally and externally, at every stage of that. And I went to work with this for 3 days and I committed fully, and I knew I had no choice. I had to do it. And all I can say is that on the third day, I had a spiritual unlock. Literally, when I took the medicine, which is, for anybody that doesn't know what Kambo is, it is a secretion from an Amazonian frog. That what they do is they burn you, and then they take the secretion, they put it onto you. The poison starts to go into your bloodstream immediately, and you purge. So there's symbolism to the purge. You're purging a lot of the demons in your body. Then you physically purge most of the time. So you have a bucket and you puke, but it really boosts your immune system afterwards. So I had gone for the physiological benefits, being like, this is going to boost my immune system. I wasn't living too much in that spiritual space at the time. But the third day, all I can explain it is I had literally this key turn in my lower left stomach. And I felt, boom, this click. And that's the only way I can describe it. And since that time, this is my journey. This is my path. There is no other way. I leaned into breath work. I leaned into meditation every day, healing meditations with Joe Dispenza, and I've gotten better ever since. And it was from then, what they call the hero's journey, me saying, like, how can I allow other people to go through life not knowing about these tools? And how can I stand by and watch other people get in the place that I had gotten myself to, in this corporate, unhappy, doing things that didn't fire me up place, and not do something about it? I got to scream at the hilltops. I got to help people. I got to support people. So now that's why we're doing the work we do together every day. We're having the conversations we're having, because any friend I can influence, any human in my life that's willing to listen to me and is ready for action, because you can't drag anybody into this work or this journey, but is ready to take action. That's why I choose to continually educate myself, dive deeper on my journey, do the work myself, so that I can create space and help others. So that is a good 15-minute rant probably on my story, Mr. Sampson.
Yeah, no, it's a great rant. And I wouldn't even call it a rant, to be honest. A few things I want to highlight in there for people that might not know is this for you was happening during the pandemic. And I think that is a important element to highlight, because not only when modern medicine and what we've been taught as kids, what works and what we shouldn't take and what we're supposed to be doing to take care of ourselves, that wasn't there at this exact time that you're dealing with an actual health issue. We're seeing it in the news of, people in ICU beds and all that stuff, but you're really like living it at home. The fear is that, well, my doctor's not going to be there, or it's going to be 8 weeks to see them. What's going to happen in that 8 weeks? And I feel mentally, and this probably happened for a lot of people that had significant issues during this time, you probably digress in anything positive in your life. I can't physically exert myself. What if I hurt myself? I can't take that new prescription. What if I have an adverse reaction or an effect? It's so scary when that element is gone, especially when you have a very old school mindset of doctors don't call Cambo medicine.
No.
They use these buzzwords like, oh, that's holistic, or that's experimental, or all that stuff, right? I've talked about this in other podcasts. It's scary when the most healing I've ever done, the most growth I've ever had was when I've been in my most open-minded space, my most open-minded self. And when the people that are responsible for your health and wellness are so close-minded, it's fucking scary. It's super scary because they're the first to tell you, well, it may not work for you, or 10% side effects. So you're thinking, okay, am I that 1 out of 10 people? Or no, we're all different. Everyone's going to have a different reaction. And I don't know about other people, but I don't like becoming a statistic. I'm just going to find my own way and do it. And I want to highlight that because it sounded like, and for other people that may resonate with this, is you were backed into a corner, but you're so appreciative that you were, almost, where if you wouldn't have been, or if the antibiotics would have worked 50%, okay, well, my gut is wrenched and I'm feeling bad, but my swelling has gone down. So then maybe you just would have stayed in that lane. I feel you almost have to go down that path of reaching your heaviest you've ever been, or the lowest mentally you've ever been, to seek these new, I wouldn't even call them new, because all this stuff, you talk about Amazon and stuff. I'm sure this is thousands of years old. So it's kind of hilarious that I even said that. That's a little bit of deprogramming that I have to work through. But I love that, because that's where I discovered you. Is we had this previous flyboard relationship, party mentality, similar friend circles, always living in the fast lane, and everything we did. Everything. It's business, sports, drinking, partying, travel, no sleep, shitty diet. We weren't even conscious of what we were eating or putting in our bodies. It was just, okay, I hadn't eaten all day. Let's go. It's so enlightening, because I remember after that Cambo treatment you had, we were associates on social media a little bit, and we would, check in from time to time. And I think I'm only speaking for myself, but I imagine it's similar for you, as I kind of kept up with you based off of your social media posts. I was just like, oh man, yeah, it's April. It's opening season in Kelowna. Oh, cool. That's, he must be doing good. And I'm sure he's excited for the year. I hope he has a great year. And kind of just having a conversation with you by myself in my head kind of thing is how that worked. But you went dark for a while there. I don't know the exact timeline, but there was no posts, no updates. I'd never seen you green on social media. This is going into the winter of, what was it? I think it was 2021. And when you came back and I seen your presence come out, I was like, man, who is this guy? This must be Mike's brother, because this is not Mike. Like positive affirmations, preaching mindfulness and love and all this sort of stuff. And I'm just like, man, where did this guy go? And I let it be for a bit. I was just like, maybe he's going through a phase, or who knows what's going on. Yeah. When I finally reached out, man, I was so fucking stoked that I reached out, because it was the message I needed at the time. So to me, what you were for me is what Cam was for you. And it was awesome. It was so great. It was such a great way. And I can certainly tell you that when you say that you have to scream from the rooftops and tell people about this stuff, it hit me like glue on a wall, man. It just stuck. And I was so appreciative of it. And we kind of kept in touch a little bit. And then Trevor came into your life. And I'd love for you to touch on that, because that's where I am now. We've been on this relationship for almost a year. And I would love for you to touch on that, man, because that really is where it started for me, seeing the message come from multiple people, and it was identical, it was consistent, it was productive, and it was different, but it was different in the greatest of ways. So I'd love for you to touch on that one.
Beautiful, brother. Yeah. I love that you bring up our kind of gap as well, because it was so timely when you reached out, and thank you for that compliment on me being your Cam, because it's an important step. And man, we need those people in our lives. right? We really, really do. And I want to commend you for that, for having the courage to reach out, because here's what I know. There's 100 more of you, and there were 100 more of me that don't reach out when it comes to men, and being prideful and thinking, oh, it's weak for me to look for help. It's weak for me to ask these questions. I'll figure it out myself. And so it's so powerful that we take those steps. And this is a perfect prelude to how I found Trev in our journey, because that's the space we were in when we found each other. And some people might laugh at me even saying we found each other, right? But that's the truth. And it's fucking awesome. It's hilarious. But yeah, we live about 4 doors down from each other. And he was strolling the neighborhood with his 2 kids, having a beer at the time. And we would give your regular kind of like head nods at first. And then one of us broke the actual silence and open discussion. And yeah, I remember us just assessing the situation. Okay, you've got 2 young boys. I've got 2 young boys. We're both in the same neighborhood. And eventually, I remember I was the one that asked, I said, do you want to play a game of tennis? And so we did. And there's multiple parts to that story, because that was at a time where Lyme was attacking my hands. And I remember the first game of tennis, like, man, I can't volley this ball. My hand is shaped funny because blah, blah, blah. So it's a bit of a side story, but that's why we lost touch for a bit. But during that tennis game, Trev talked about how he wanted to move his family to Costa Rica. He talked about how he was in online marketing. And these pieces for me were immediately connectors, like, all right, I want to hang out with this motherfucker. He's cool. He's on the same wavelength for me. And so we started having discussions like that. And again, we had a bit of a gap because Trev asked to play tennis again, but I wasn't ready to open up about the physical experiences I was having with my body, because frankly, I didn't know what it was at the time, nor we just weren't at that level, right? Or so we could have been, but I never breached it. So we had a bit of a time gap. And then I remember I went to Christmas, and Trev had seen some of my videos about cold dipping. And so he's like, man, I want to come over and I want to check out your cold tank. And I was like, it's just a horse trough with water in it, but sure, man. And like, this was step 2 in our friendship and the beginning of our relationship, because he came over the next day. I see his video. He'd gone out, he'd bought the horse trough, he was getting in it. He sent me. So I was like, okay, this guy's an action taker. We just continued to connect on these things. So fast, we kept in touch throughout the winter. We were both just cold dipping and doing stuff. And come the spring, we'd done a podcast together on his channel. We talked about helping me launch mine. And then I just said to him, I was like, listen, Trev, you think you can get away for a weekend? You want to have a bro weekend? And this is where it really all began. He literally is like, man, I know a good deal at a resort down in Summerland. Trev booked us a room at a resort. We went on a hike. We did breath work at the top of the hike. I took my e-foil. We just had a powerful bro weekend that didn't involve getting blackout drunk and doing the thing, but it was having business chats and doing healthy things. And then we sat there and we said, there's got to be other guys looking for this, that are sick of the old talking about the game and having beers. And so it was that weekend we said, we're going to host a men's retreat. And we literally booked it. We booked a place that weekend to host it 2 months from then. And we followed through with it. And since then, we've continued to unleash things to serve men that we were, versions of us that we used to be.
The idea of a bro weekend that doesn't involve blackout drunk or indulging, having to escape life, but just being productive and being intentional with what you wanted to do and just letting it flow. I don't know why that's so abstract. It was abstract for me. And it's so funny because I can't see my previous mindset towards things like that anymore. I listen to that and it fires me up. It gets me jacked, gets me excited. Whereas conversely, if you told me, hey, we're going to go to a stag party, I'm going to be like, nah, hope you guys have fun. And it's weird, man. It's just where I'm at. And it's such a shame. It really is. And don't get me wrong. I'm not pushing people down by talking down about people that do that. If that's you and that's what you want to do, the fantastic. If you have that stressful life or stressful job that you need a release from, that's fine. I think the messaging here is just there's other ways to do it. There's other ways to find balance and find that energy to be able to put it into other productive means. You don't need to have that release. You have to be able to say no. You have to be able to delegate. You have to be able to find where your limits and your thresholds are in order to be able to ensure that you're productive and not destroying yourself on weekends so that you start another busy week already below 50% and then it just spirals out of control. It snowballs, right? And it affects every aspect of your life, whether people like it or not. You might be doing it because you're trying to release stress from work. But if you think going down that route isn't going to affect your marriage, your relationship with your kids, your ability to maintain finances, your ability to maintain a healthy body, a healthy mind, you're fucking fooling yourself. You're absolutely fooling yourself.
Yeah.
And you're telling yourself a false story. And it really is a shame. And I love that idea that you guys took action, not knowing who was going to attend, not knowing if anybody was going to attend. And I remember watching videos of Trev sanding the wooden barrels for coal plunging and stuff. And it was just super cool. For those that don't know, with Trev, the way I got to know him and the first time we virtually met is you guys also started this cold plunge truth. You guys were cold dipping in the river. And I thought that was super cool. And it sucked that you guys lived 9-hour drive, hour and a half flight from me, because I would have been one of the first guys in the river. And I remember I was your very first virtual guest.
Yeah.
We made that happen on an iPhone. Me and my neighbor Ted went. And that was an amazing experience because I had never had experience or exposure to cold like that before. I had watched the Wim Hof documentary and I was like, man, this guy's nuts. And I kind of just chalked it up to that. It was one of those YouTube surfing, found it. I think it was the Yes Theory video of those guys where they went and visited him in Poland and they were jumping into this ice cold water. And I couldn't even compute in my brain how cold it was. I just told myself it's too cold for me and that's it, period. And the same thing when you guys were doing it, there was snow on the banks, a little bit of ice in some of the lower moving areas of the river. And you guys were getting into it. And the same thing, I'm trying to tell myself, I'm like, how cold is that? And then I immediately go, yeah, it's just too cold for you. It just doesn't make sense. And finally, when I got up the courage to do it with you and you guys were receptive to trying to make it work virtually, hoping we had enough signal in the river and hoping we did all that stuff, it was amazing. The one thing I remember very specifically about it is it wasn't hard for me to go into it. Between me and Ted, I'll kind of dive back a little bit. When we committed to it and I reached out to Ted, his wife actually reached out to me the next day and said, he needs this. You reached out at the absolute perfect time, just everything going on in his life. This is something that he needs. And I was like, absolutely. The morning we woke up to do it, I believe it was April 7th of 2022 is when we did this. And I woke up and there was snowflakes the size of toonies coming down and it was -1 degrees outside. Yes, I do live in the north of Canada. And it was so cold.
Say, for anybody that doesn't know, that the toonie is a $2 coin in Canada, just in case.
That is true. Yeah. Yeah. It's about an inch and a half in diameter. And it was big. And I woke up and I looked out, I was drinking coffee and I was like, why? Like, this doesn't make any sense. But I committed to myself. I knew that you guys were going to do it regardless. So I was like, I don't want to let anybody down. And then I pulled up to Ted's house and I seen him in the window and he's kind of walking to the truck. And as we're driving, he's like, honestly, Alfred, he's like, if you wouldn't have pulled up today, I wouldn't have been upset about it. I wouldn't even have texted you to remind you. I was kind of hoping you'd forgotten about it. And it was really cool experience driving. And then we're talking about what it's likely going to be like, which it was the exact opposite of what we thought it was going to be. But it was super cool to know that my committing to it was that the fact that you guys were doing it regardless, because you guys had a message, you guys had done multiple weeks, you guys were doing this. I didn't want to let you guys down. And then that gave me momentum. And when I pulled up in front of his house, it gave him momentum that I showed up. He needed somebody to just be that guy. And then when we got there, I was the first one in the water. And courage is something I've never struggled with, just blind courageousness, just kind of, being a yes person. That's never really bothered me. And when we got in, Ted was really surprised at how fast I got in because we brought beach chairs. So we put the beach chairs down. The water was a little bit up to the clavicle there. And we're sitting down and I got in and I was holding the selfie stick and we were on Zoom in freezing cold water. And when we got in at first, it was really hard to catch my breath. And you guys warned me. We did the breath work beforehand to really prepare ourselves. And I wasn't ready for that. That hit me harder than I anticipated. And I know it hit Ted really hard too. But as we started talking about words like journey, which are obviously an umbrella term, that's not a very specific term. That's an umbrella term that defines your individual route that you're taking to get better. That's probably the best way I would describe that. Is we started talking about men need this, communities need this, people who are struggling need this. And I remember the moment Trev interrupted and he's like, it's been 9 minutes. And we looked at each other and we're like, it's felt like 30 seconds. it's felt like 30 seconds. And I've done a lot of cold plunging since then, but the depth of that conversation completely eliminated my body's awareness that I was freezing. Like since then, I haven't done a cold plunge that past time as quickly as that one. Now, maybe that's because it was my first time and beginner's luck or whatever you want to call it. But when I came out, I was as red as a fucking lobster, cooked lobster. It was ridiculous. It was so insane. And I was hooked. I was immediately hooked. It was the first thing, or probably one of the only things I've ever done that physically challenging and mentally challenging that had an immediate positive effect instantly. Like literally snap your fingers,
dopamine
bang,
rush, boom,
bang. It was crazy. You know,
I remember it.
Go ahead.
I remember that day, and you couldn't have described it better. Like Trevor and I got on the video, and it was cold where we were, but your guys, like Lake or the river you guys were at, was a scene. It was a winter scene. Like the wind was coming in sideways, and you just chilled looking at that video. And I was like, wow, they're doing this. And they got the truck there to get back into, but man, I don't know how they're getting out of it. And sitting down, and then I remember us during conversation being like, these guys are still talking like we're getting cold here. Like 9 minutes. It was impressive. And then to have that discussion in the truck afterwards with the red line. Yeah. And then to see what you did with it afterwards was impressive, right? Like, I don't know, I forget how long it was later, but I remember seeing you with Rod and some other guys cutting holes in the ice. Actually, you went and did a weekend as well to learn more about it. So you had done a few things that it really launched you into, and it was really cool to see, man. And I think that was the beginning for you kind of taking action and running with it.
It was something that gravitated to me and hooked me really quickly because of A, how difficult it was, but B, the effects on my body afterwards. And I've felt this in minor doses before. The way Arnold Schwarzenegger describes working out and when he gets a significant pump, he describes it like better than sex. And people always put that feeling or that interaction or that bond between two people pretty high up there. But it seriously is like that in the sense of my muscles didn't hurt. When you're numb and I can walk on rocks in my bare feet and I can't feel them, there's something about it. You feel like Superman. You feel like nothing can touch you. And then the come down after it, when you feel all the cold blood from your extremities go into your center and you start shivering, but it's almost like you feel your body healing. It's almost like in real time, I can feel that my body senses something is wrong and it's activating every aspect of my body to ensure that I survive. It truly does boil it down to that biological sense of survival. It truly does. And same thing when I was in the water, I could feel all my extremities get cold very, very quickly, but my gut felt like I was on a beach in Mexico. All this warm water and this energy. And I don't know the actual medical terminology around it, but I'm sure it was my immune system and my digestive nature and everything in my gut just firing on all cylinders, being like, this motherfucker is going to die if we don't do something about it.
Yeah. You nailed it. It's your autonomic nervous system. What it does is it pumps all your blood away from your extremities to your major organs to protect them. Like you nailed it. It's exactly what it's doing. So to feel that's incredible because it's fight or flight, and it's the body's natural intelligence and survival mechanism, right? So it's wild, and it fires your immune system, as you said, to repair and everything that's. Your body's just on such high alert, right? And saying, what the hell are you doing to me? But that's what builds the resilience in our mind when we get through that, because literally our bodies are saying, get the fuck out of here. Be anywhere but here, right? But we are building the resilience to keep ourselves there. And as you said, the breath is such a key to that because it helps us calm that nervous system.
I love it, man. So that was my first real exposure into that. And that was something that I was so appreciative of the experience. Me and Ted were buzzing for weeks on end. And we had done a few since then in our pools in our backyard. And then we went to Jackfish Lake and cut holes in the ice and did all that. That was actually the winter following. So this was kind of right when you and Trev started the men's group, which I am now a part of, Extremely Conscious. And I'll give you time to let people know about that. But when that came out, I was hooked. And it was the beginning of me looking at almost every aspect of my life, my marriage, my relationship with my daughter, my relationship with my friends and my circles, how I do my work, passion projects of mine, anything. I looked at it as will I receive a tangible net positive benefit from it?
Mm-hmm.
And when I say net positive, that's my term that I use to eliminate destructive patterns and behaviors, whether that's alcohol. It's expensive. It doesn't serve me. There's zero health benefits. What the fuck? Like, it doesn't serve me. It would be the same if I was a smoker or if I was a McDonald's breakfast eater every single day or whatever it may be. Anything that really you look at where there's nothing that I do with it that serves me in any way, shape, or form. And I used that one day of cold plunging when I really got punched in the face with reality of like, there's so many other things out there, and finding cold water, especially in Northern Canada, is not very hard. So it's not like I need to buy a membership or do all this stuff. I've since chose to invest financially in these sorts of things. Like you mentioned, that Wim Hof retreat I went on in Calgary, which was terribly amazing, if that makes any sense, because it was minus 20 that day. Fuck, it was so cold, man. But it was just a really cool way of, at the time, you guys didn't explain the science. You guys weren't talking about the autonomic nervous system or anything like that.
We didn't even know it. Yeah.
We just did breath work, and and that goes back to that just pure courageousness that men usually have, but we have it with other things. Like, hey, I bet you can't drink this 40 of vodka, and then we do it. So we kind of tend to be our own worst enemies at times. And you guys were there shining this positive light of something different, something positive, something that benefits you. It's not easy. Nobody ever says it's easy, but it serves you. It truly, truly does. And I was super appreciative of that, man. So that was a super cool experience, and I fucking loved it.
Oh, it was such a fun chapter, man. And I love that you're involved in it. And that was, again, like our first kind of re-interaction almost, right? Re-engagement. But I love that you bring up the energy and the activity of how it is a net positive for you, that Mr. Logical Alfred. I love it. But it is for men, what we've done is it's redirecting our energy into something that serves our future self, right? And I don't fault men out there, because look at the society we grew up in. I don't know about you, but I was born into parties in my house, of running around the neighborhood, my parents drinking at all times. And they were great parents. I'm not even saying there was trauma there or anything, but that was the influence. And that's the influence of the majority of us growing up in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, is that it was all around us. In celebrations in societies today, what are people doing? They're cheersing, they're pouring champagne. What's your vacation supposed to consist of? It's indulging in meals, indulging in drinks. Heck, when I was 23, I'd buy a carton of smokes on my way to an all-inclusive. And like, we all did it. But this is what the picture that's painted, that what we're supposed to do, right? But it keeps us dull. It keeps us in that cycle. It's just not serving us, right? And so when we take that energy and we redirect it, especially as men, because men, we've just been told, work, produce, provide, but cry? No, you keep that down there. You pack that away. You're supposed to be the strong one. Don't talk about your emotions, right? So as men, we're continually carrying this burden. And no wonder so many men are diving into vices like drugs and alcohol, because we're doing anything just to not feel that shit, right? Or to have a temporary week away from it, or to work more because that's our justification, because we're still producing. And yeah, it's just sad. So, I mean, what we're trying to do is redirect that energy, right? Into stuff like, it's fun. And we're building relationships with other men that are incredible. Listen, the call we were on this morning, we had a conversation about a movement that's happening that's tied to a very high political candidate. Like these are the types of people that we're interconnected with and very close to when you get into a world of wanting to be and do better for yourself. And forget that piece. It's just the fact of that you can show up feeling good each day. The fact that you can be present with your kids. The fact that you can be a better partner and lover and friend to your wife. The fact that you can shift and find a career that you love and you want to do that. You wake up fucking excited and not looking towards Friday on a Monday and dreading a Monday on a Friday, right? Like this is the shift that we can all have. And that, Alfred, you're a prime example. I'd say it's been incredible to be on this journey with you, because the shifts you've made in your life in such a short period of time, and the beautiful text I received from your wife when we were at the men's retreat as a testament. One small piece of that is just incredible. And this is one example of what we're all able to do when we lean into this and we look for more within ourselves. And that's what's important too. I'll slow down in a moment here, but I'm passionate if you can't tell. But it's important for everybody to know that whatever you're searching for as well, it's right here. It is fucking right here inside you. The answers are within you. Yes, there's guides like myself and other people, and Alfred's a leader amongst people now as well. There are people out there who have done it, who can guide you and point you in the direction, or have programs and things of that nature. But ultimately, if you are constantly looking externally for things to be done for you and this change to happen for you, it's never going to happen. You have to be willing and ready to be the healer, be the change maker yourself. Do these things. You can read 100 self-help books, but if you don't take action on one of them, cool, you're a bit more intelligent on what needs to be done. But it's in the action, and it's in believing that you can make the change yourself. So motivational rant over.
It's very applicable. My message or my desired outcome for anybody who would consume this content or is curious about what we're talking about is almost identical. I spin it a little bit different, where I think people just need to get rid of their individualism. Get the fuck rid of you wanting to do everything yourself. Listen, there's certain things in your life that you have to handle. I mean, behind closed doors, personal, traumatic, whatever you want to call it. But when you're seeking new adventure, if you're seeking to do something difficult, if you're reaching out in a vulnerable state, trying to do it by yourself or trying to do it with an inanimate object or substance or shitty content or addictive behavior, you're not going to succeed. And I even chalk it up to just look at your own history. Look at before the last 30 years. Let's even look at it past our generation. The communities we grew up in, the brotherhoods that existed, historical armies, stories of the Spartan warriors, or whatever you want to call it. Very seldom do you hear of a successful masculine male story in history being solo. Doesn't exist. It's not something that existed. This country was not built by solo men. This country was not led by only one particular person. And just the world, historical people of significance that made incredible change. Wim even talks about it himself, where his traumatic experience allowed him to explore cold, but he had to seek out other people to help him in that endeavor. Very, very seldomly is it a solo journey. It's no different than if you go to eat to dinner and you outsource a chef to cook your food. It's hiring a coach, hiring somebody with experience, or building brotherhood, building connection. People pay for this shit all the time in a subliminal, non-awareness way. You hire people all the time to test you on getting your driver's license. You hire people all the time to renovate your house. How often are you vetting this person? You're taking their job title or their business card for face value. This shit is no different. I think why it looks abstract is because no time in history have we had to sell friendship. No time in history have we had to sell the concept of just being in another person's presence, because the sense of community has been absolutely obliterated in today's society. It really takes a lot of energy to cultivate something of meaning with your neighbor, with fellow parents at your kids' schools, within sporting leagues, if you're in a kickball league or a beer league or a shinny league, whatever it may be. It's so fucking hard to create meaningful connections of people you talk to almost every day. And it seems like a service that we have to pay for. And that's why it seems so strange to people, because they're like, I'm literally having to pay for your presence. What the hell? That makes no sense. And that's not the purpose, but that's the perception. And that's why when we try as mentors, as coaches, as subject matter experts in certain areas, it sounds weird that we have to sell ourselves when we're trying to do all things positive. If you want to get on a 1-hour free call, and I know that you offer those to people that are struggling, that want to explore different modalities of health and wellness and awareness and mindfulness, it seems odd when I hear you have to try to pitch that in a very tiptoe way. But I think where that comes from is we've never in the human history had to do that. And that's why it's so weird. For me, I love it when I hear you, I hear Cam, I hear Danielle, I hear all these people that we know of that sell their services for the betterment of other people. It fucking fires me up. But when I tell other people that aren't as maybe aware or conscious or open-minded like us, it sounds strange to them. It sounds strange that you're talking about Cambo. It sounds strange you're talking about psilocybin and something that in Canada and the US, they call drugs, but places like Costa Rica and the Amazon, they call medicine. It's very interesting to see that dichotomy and that difference between how people who are immersed in it every day look at the positive, where people who are ignorant towards it look at it in the negative. And it's just so strange to me, but I hope people will eventually open their minds to just get a taste. It doesn't mean that breathwork is for you. It doesn't mean that cold is for you. What it means is that I can absolutely assure you 100% of the time, if you're not in a good place, the journey to get to a better place is not comfortable. It's not fun. It's not easy. It's going to be difficult. But I can assure you that that is going to get you closer to being better, being more fulfilled, feeling more competent and confident in yourself than the converse of doing nothing, staying in the same habits, not doing anything productive. It's going to put you further and further backwards. And that's only going to make that uncomfortable journey that much longer. No different than if you're semi-fit and you try to go to the gym to get more fit, that's easier than if you're 280 pounds, really shitty diet, shitty behaviors, shitty habits. It's going to be much longer and feel like a much bigger Mount Everest to climb, but you have to start somewhere. And we have this ringing phrase in our community. I know it's not something that we created, but we said it a few times, is one day or day one. I've seen The Rock post that on the social medias. I've seen other people put it. I imagine there's an original, author of that saying, but I fucking love that. I fucking love that saying because it applies to everything. People associate it with fitness, but it's really anything. Stopping drinking, eating better, sleeping better, getting out of a brutal relationship, beginning a positive relationship, whatever it may be. One day or day one. And it doesn't need to be perfect. And I love the messaging in our group, and I'm going to digress here shortly, but I love the messaging in our group where it doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't. Like my podcast, for instance, I'm only a few episodes in. Is there improvements? Certainly. Do I think I've done a good job? Certainly. Is there things that I want to do differently? Certainly. But I just did it. And I've had a few hundred people listen to the episode so far. I've gotten great positive feedback because the first anything that you do is going to suck. The first steak you cook that you've never cooked before is going to be overdone, underseasoned. It's going to be shit. The first time you drive a car, you're going to burn the clutch. You're going to burn the tranny. Like, it's not going to sound great. It's going to suck. You just got to do it. You just got to be willing to fail, willing to look like an idiot, willing to look. And I use that term, and it's not, because people that are in the gym, if you go lift weights for the first time, you might think you look like an idiot, but you're still looking better than the person that's not lifting weights. So it's shifting that mindset to be willing to look vulnerable, to look silly, to look strange, to look different, be perceived in a way that you've never been perceived before. It takes gumption. It takes courage to do that. And as men, it's so strange because we're willing to be courageous on the outward. We're willing to kind of exude our energy outward in a courageous manner, jump off the cliffs, get in the cold, run the marathons when we don't even train. Most of us are willing to try and do that, but it's the other way. It's bringing it in from an imagery, from a mindset, from a mental standpoint. That's where the growth is. So I love that messaging that you said, but my 15-minute rant is done now.
No, beautifully said, brother. And I couldn't agree more. And I recorded my first podcast on my phone in my old truck driving down the highway for that exact reason. I had told myself so many excuses as to why it needed to be perfect or what I needed to do before I started, until I started. And guess what is my most viewed episode out of, I'm only like 15 episodes in because I'm kind of sporadic, but it's that first one. It is that first one. Wearing a suit I didn't want to be wearing because I was driving down to go to work and being in my old Toyota that I love, but it was authentic and it was real and it was my journey. And I didn't care what anybody thought. And that's the challenge we have. I agree with you wholeheartedly, right? Is too many of us care what the fuck people think of us. At the end of the day, we've all heard this, but nobody cares. Nobody cares. We think so many people care about what we're putting out there and all these pieces. And at the end of the day, there's very few that do. And the few that do are the ones that need to see what you're putting out and the ones that resonate. And those are the people you want anyways. The rest you don't. And that's an important message as well as you go through this journey of growth. When you decide to take that courageous step, you're going to lose people in your life. There's ways to do it gradually. And then there's full teardowns where you have to be willing to step forward regardless of the opinions, because you're going to irritate people around you as you start to rise, as you start to do the work, simply because they're not doing it. Right. And that's not judgment. It's not. Trust me. I've had to learn the hard way. When I first started this work, I wanted nothing more than to pull my wife in by her feet to pay for any program, to be like, babe, let's do this together. But this work is not, it's not about that. We can't pull people in. Otherwise, we're creating more trauma because then they feel like they're not sufficient. right? But it's patience for our loved ones, and it's loving wholly, regardless of where they're at, and meeting them where they're at, and leading by action, regardless of what the people around us are saying. Because at the end of the day, there's a reason it's called our journey. It's ours. Mine is mine, yours is yours. And they're all different. And our timing is all different. And so it's there's so many lessons along the way. It's a patience game, man. And when we start to look at ourselves, that's the part we need to develop if we don't have it within us already.
Yeah, I'm reminded of the story Hansel and Gretel of leaving the breadcrumbs, right, to find your way back.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that story because I feel like it's applicable. I have a few people in my life that I know that would benefit from just becoming more open-minded and replacing one or two bad habits with something a bit more growth centered, or something a bit more geared around just seeing yourself become better and just being more mindful about what you consume, who you associate with, what you do on the weekends, and that sort of stuff. So, but I love the idea of breadcrumbs because I think it's happened. I mean, our initial kind of, I don't know, reignition of our friendship was when you came on preaching a consistent message, just doing you, not caring what people thought, not having the need to sell it to anybody or tell people that if you choose not to do this, you're stupid. That wasn't the messaging at all. It was just from a very neutral place of, I've been there. I did it. It worked for me. If you're going through similar shit, maybe it'll work for you. And that's it. And that's been the common message from anybody, from the Cams, the Danielles, yourself, from the Zans of the world, everybody that I've associated with that's in this space of whatever your rock bottom or whatever your reasoning was for pivoting, changing, wanting to get better, or dropping shitty behaviors. It's not something that is sold, but it's just so strange to me that people would look at that as, why would I pay for that? And it goes back to my perception on it is we've never had to sell this type of service before. So it's very strange to people. But when I look at people selling their service, it's something that I don't know why there's resistance to putting money and investing in that. It doesn't make any sense to me because people are willing to put their money in other shit. There's probably people out there that have $500 in monthly subscriptions to shit they don't even fucking use. You know, people are willing to pay for porn. People are willing to pay more money for expensive food, or all this shit that they sell nowadays of getting food delivered to your house rather than go to the grocery store and it's sold to you, that it saves you money by giving you convenience and all this stuff. And so I just, it doesn't make sense to me that somebody is preaching to you and offering you a taste for no commitment. And then people are just so abrasive to it. It doesn't make sense to me. I can't compute that in my brain. I don't know why.
Well, you nailed it. I mean, it's tangibles and it's external, because we're taught, right? Oh, you've got the nice watch, man. You must work hard. You must be worth something. You wear the Gucci. You drive the Ferrari. You know what I mean? These are the things that define people in our society, and that's why. And they're tangibles. You can see them. You can feel them. You can touch them, right? But when you're spending money on you, oh, okay. So what do I get for that? What do I get? If I'm going to spend $1,500 with you, what am I getting? They can't feel the result, right? Off the bat. So there is this unseen that really you need to believe, you need to have faith. And it's hilarious in this world. You know, I deal in the energetic space now too. And I try to hold back on a lot of those conversations in the beginning because I want to meet people where they're at. But we believe, how's the internet work? How do our cell phones work? There's all these things flying through the air that we can't see, right? But when it comes to believing in you and something you can create or learn, you know, or the energy of the human body and auras and all these pieces, we question it tooth and nail, right? So there's a belief there along spending as well and investing in yourself. And until you're in it, you don't realize it. I was no different. When I invested my first $1,000 in myself, it was for a 12-week course. I'll tell you, I'm in the 20 to 30,000 range since then, easily, without even thinking about it. Because I know if you strip everything away from me in my life, take this desk, take this beautiful house, take all this shit, I'll do it again. I don't need any of it. My biggest asset in life is me. And the more grounded I am, the more I can be somebody for the rest of the world, the more I can serve the rest of the world. We are our greatest asset. And when I'm calm and collected, it can be amazing for my kids and my wife, and focused for my clients and for my other job, my other team. If we focus on us, when we realize we are the center of it all, and the knowledge we take in and the tools that we build within us, you can create it all. You can fucking have it all. You can have the side business, you can have the career, but people think more, 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 more. It's scary. And then the time conversation comes in. But that's where the investment needs to happen in ourselves. It's the best thing we can invest in is us, period. Then you want the physical shit. You can create more abundance of finances when you invest in you. That's going to happen, but it starts with you, right? So I think that's the thought cycle around that. And it's a big shift from where we've been the past 20 years.
Yeah. Hearing those numbers, I'm sure some people are probably just shaking their head. And that's a number that I certainly haven't gotten to yet, obviously. But even in the small, and I can explain this to people from being a consumer rather than a provider of this sort of material and this content and this sort of space, is especially when people have known you for years and they're wanting to reach out in a way, and you have a product, a service, a suggestion, whatever it may be. The first thing that went through my mind is the Mike that I knew and the first time we met and the many adventures and experiences we had after that was cultivated just by chance. We were aligned, mutual friends of friends. We all kind of came together. Kalamalka, I actually believe, was the first time we met on that epic Canadian world record. Let's go. Yes. And I can promise you, right before I e-transferred money to pay for a service Mike and Trevor were providing, the first thing I thought of is that the moment money gets involved, it dilutes the relationship. It transitions from a friendship to a business relationship. And I do believe it's a very fine line sometimes with that sometimes the business component can supersede a friendship or a family relationship or whatever it may be. But when it's done right, and this, unfortunately, for most people will likely come through trial and error, is seeing what works for you and what doesn't, is the moment you find out that this is what works for you, it actually strengthens that relationship. Because for me as a consumer, it tells me that what you're doing is authentic and effective. So I'm obviously a fan. And then on the flip side, from your perspective, you likely as a provider have an additional incentive to maintain that, because if not, you're going to have both a business relationship and likely a friendship affected by it. So that was my perception of it, is I was very nervous and apprehensive to do it at the beginning, but I knew that if I didn't do this, I had to do something else. So why not give this a shot? And in my head, I know that by transferring money to you guys, it's not going to a big corporation. It's not going to a franchise fee. It's going to pay for swimming for the boys, or it's going to pay for yurts at your new property in Ontario, whatever it may be. And this goes back to the same concept of when people support local small business. When I buy food at a local bakery, yeah, I'm paying $4.50 a loaf of bread rather than $3 at Superstore. But that extra $1.50, I can actually put a tangible value to where that's going. So when my daughter goes to summer soccer camp with the daughter of the person of the local bakery, I immediately know that likely her registration fee, I had something to do with that. And there's a degree of pride that's associated with that. But I know that that initial fear of having money conflate any sort of personal relationship, that's to me a negative result of today's society. Is money is so valued. Like one concept I have in life here, and this is something I've never talked about before out loud, is the idea of people not talking about money. Like when I hear positive influencers online saying, don't talk to people about your money, I think they say that from a position of they don't want to like blow up their current reality. But I think that is a massive, massive mistake in society. And amongst other things, I think you need to talk about all things, your struggles and stuff, but money especially, because it's this polarized measure of success, which I think is bullshit in the first place. But when people aren't willing to talk about their successes with money, their failures with money, that resonates with everything. People aren't willing to talk about their failures with alcoholism, how they maybe found success getting away from alcoholism. When you don't do it with one of the most important things in your life that's used to measure where you're at in life, you're not going to do it with other small things. If you can't do it with the most important thing in your life, or maybe money is the reason why it's your biggest struggle in life, if you can't do that, what makes you think you're going to do it with anything else? If you can't be honest with yourself and with the people close to you, and then we have to do good jobs at, as society, when people come to us with that, it can't be in a judgmental way. And we hear this all the time. People who are doctors, there's actually statistics out there that when you look at default rates in Canada, the highest default rates are of people that make more than $100,000 a year. So the more money you make, it seems that you're actually doing worse. And then you have the government or society or people telling you like, well, you need to pay a certain amount of tax because you're so well off. You should have your shit together. Well, just because I make a certain amount of money, why does that mean that I have to have my shit together? Maybe I've worked my ass off, destroyed every other aspect of my life, but I worked the most amount of overtime. I prioritize it over other important aspects of my life. But maybe I have a massive drinking and drug problem. Maybe I have a shopping problem. Maybe I don't know how to manage money. And the way I cope with my emotional traumas is that I have to book trips rather than party on the weekends. I'll burn out for 2 months and then go to Mexico. I'll burn out for 2 months and go to Vegas. I'll burn out for 2 months and whatever it may be, buy a big purchase, get a big lifted truck because that's symbolism of success in my life. The bigger the truck, the bigger the problems kind of thing. That's a joke in Alberta here.
Yeah.
But it's that sort of shit where why don't we talk about these things? Why can't we be okay with paying for a service that might seem abstract and then in return getting value? But like you said, I can't put a tangible amount to it. It just doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand why all these things don't become easy discussion points for people from a position of I want to get better. I want to share. I do well with money. Let me show you how. I make a lot of money, but I'm broke as fuck. How do you do it? That sort of stuff. But we don't. And we're judged. We're demonized. We're considered different. It just seems so backwards to me. But I love the community that I've now discovered of men, of like-minded individuals, of quote unquote holistic approaches to life and medicine, because it's just these people that don't care. I don't care if you drive a Ferrari or a shitbox Toyota. I don't care if you live in a massive house or if you live in a condo in Costa Rica, like whatever it is, it doesn't matter. The measure of your happiness is your happiness. Are you content and happy in your situation? That's it. And that doesn't mean that that's right for me, but as long as you got a smile on your face and you're doing well, when we can share these things together, I know that smile on your face is genuine. It's not fake. Where now there's so many people smiling and struggling. There's so many people that are stoic, but are doing very well, but they have no one to share it with. And it's so different for most people. But I just don't understand why, as a collective, we can't just build each other up incrementally in all different facets. It seems so strange. And I don't know why, but it seems like Canada and the US are the worst in the world at it. It really does seem, because when I went to Costa Rica and I've been to all and other places, even Mexico, you go to these communities, these people have nothing. And they're the happiest people on the planet. They're content. But I think it's because they have each other. They have community. They have sense of purpose and being and togetherness. Where here, a big truck is not the same as having a brother. A massive trip or a big Rolex is not the same as having people I can rely on hand and foot, like no question about it. You can't put in a value to that. And it's just something that nobody talks about.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it. It's community, period. Dead stop. It's community. In North America, we've been so pulled away from community because of money and greed generally. There's so many different reasons, but that's a big one, right? People go in their little corners to create, and it's the competitive nature, and it's all of that, right? But so you strip that away, you take away money, you take away the things, you look in the communities like you just mentioned, their survival is in community. And if you take us back to primal beings, which our whole system is built on, that's why the happiness levels are so different, because it was community in survival. They needed to hunt together. They needed to gather. They needed to stay warm together, build shelter together. You're stronger in a pack, period. Right? And why do you think these men's groups are emerging? Because you've got these fucking primal animals running around that used to be hunter and gatherers that have these nervous systems that are constantly searching and looking for more, because that's how we were wired years ago. And it's still inside of us, right? But that just breeds anxiety and stress and all of these things when we don't channel it and direct it in the right way. Right. And then there's all the structures in the North America that we live in that keep us apart, that keep us separate. Won't go into that whole piece, but that dull us. Yeah. But community is the big one there. I think you nailed it. And the more we open our hearts and accept one another and work together, not judge each other and rise each other up, the more powerful we're going to become. Trev loves to say, a rising tide lifts all boats. And it's so true, right? It's drop the competition. Sure, there's things in life we want to have that competitive nature to push ourselves. Beautiful, love it. However, when it comes to a human level of kindness and caring and actually giving a shit about each other, we should have these open hearts that it doesn't matter what background you're from. If you need to be fed, I'll feed you. If you need a fucking hug, I'll hug you. If you need a shoulder to cry on this one, because otherwise people are retreating and they're lonely And that's why we have the rates of X, Y, and Z that we do.
Yeah, it's so true. It's that community that we just do not have anymore. And I love the term men's group because I feel that's obviously a relatively new term because back in the day, there was no such thing as men's group. That was called West Kelowna. That was the community, that was the men's group because everybody in West Kelowna was part of a, we need to band together to make it work. If somebody needs something done with their house, we'll be there. If a mom went through a traumatic experience, the women are there. And we use men's group because we're both men and it's something applicable to us. And obviously you're hosting a men's group, but I think it's just anybody. I think women, same thing, like why it's so individualized, all these modern terms to describe certain types of women and behaviors or lack of behaviors. It does such a detriment. It doesn't make any sense to me. I do think there is a fine line now between calling out bad behaviors, because I do think people need to be held accountable. I do think a degree of judgment and a degree of zero compliance is needed for certain things, like belligerent drinking. I think that just needs to be called out. And it's a situation in my eyes where if somebody's doing that in my life, I'll call it out. But what we need to stop doing is being the fixer. It's okay to point a finger and say that's not a good behavior. That's objective reality, right? If you're drinking to blackout or drinking to throwing up or drinking to the point where you can't take care of your kids the next day, I can look at that and say, you're a fucking idiot. I'm allowed to do that. And I think society would agree with that statement. What we've done is we've muddied the waters and made it murky because now it's, well, I don't know his whole story. It's like, but I'm not trying to know his whole story. I'm calling out one particular behavior and I'm not judging that person's character. I'm not saying that person isn't worth the same as me. All I'm doing is I'm objectively looking at what's in front of me and I'm calling it a spade a spade.
I think there's a way, sorry to jump in, because I want to point out one thing, that if you do it around a call up, like we do in our group, right? Instead of you're a piece of shit, it's you can do better, right? Then it's a call up to them saying, you can do better. I've done a lot of work in the last few years and I've really shifted my anger towards that exact thing, AKA that old version of me, and now lead from a place of love, right? In any scenario, I do my best to do that because that's an effective place that allows somebody to think instead of put shame upon them and them feel the shame. I'm a piece of shit. Man, he's right. I am a piece of shit, right? It's, you can do better than that. Man, maybe he is right. Maybe I can do better than that, right? Or to show them that love throws them off because they expect the shame, right? But to open your arms to that or ask the question, why do you think you drink that much? What are you chasing? What are you hiding from? To open that door, I think, is where it becomes constructive. And we step away from the judgment a little bit. And I think that's something good that we're really good at within our group. None of us are in that space anymore, but with other things, we're calling each other up to be better from good to great, and great to whatever the hell's after that. But that's the only reframe I would give in my own personal opinion anyways.
That's the growth I need to do, right? That's why I'm the consumer and you're the provider, right? And I've talked about this at length where there's even similar messages. Like we had somebody in our group that was struggling with where to live and they were struggling between an expensive place that lit them up or a cheaper place that was more affordable and put less financial stress on them. And I remember everybody in the group was so eager to give their opinion and based off of my current reality. If I was in abundance, people were saying, spend the money, do what you need to do. Or if people in our group were struggling saying, no, man, you can't do that. That's going to put you down a hole. And based off of because when they talked about the expensive place, they were fired up. They were like, oh, it's going to bring me so much peace and zen. And then the other one was like, oh, it's a cheap place, but it's a dump. It's in a bad neighborhood. And your response in the group was, I think you answered your own question. So I think you just roll with, and it was just such one of those eye-opening moments where I'm like, damn, I have a lot of growth to do. Mike is on his way closer to the top of the mountain and I'm still climbing at the bottom here, getting to base camp kind of stuff. And I love it, man, because that is an ultimate reframe. And that's something I certainly need to work on because when you come from a history or a past of fight or flight or dealing with extremes or having to develop thick skin, what you had to take as feedback, you tend to just reciprocate that back, right? Because that's what you know, that's what's familiar, that's what's understandable. You can compute it in your brain from a logical standpoint. But yeah, I love that call up idea. And I think we do that in a subliminal way. I think that is the underlying message of what we do. It's just we understand it. They don't. They take what we're saying at face value. So if it does come from a position of you're an idiot, they're going to say, I guess I'm an idiot. Whereas what you're doing isn't serving you. Is there a bigger message here? Is there something of significance that needs to be battled? Is this just a superficial way of you dealing with some much, much bigger demons. I think that's behind the message, but they're obviously not going to hear that if we don't explain it in that way.
Yeah, and it's just simply asking the question, right? And they might not be prepared to answer that question at the time, but I promise you they'll walk away thinking about it, right? But anytime we have a reaction to something that's especially like a strong reaction, we have to know it comes from something in our past, right? That we have perceived in a certain way, all of us. There's a reason we all have different triggers. We're not all the same. And that's whether that's being teased because we were bullied when we were young, whether that's calling out drinking because shit, we've dealt with a lot of crap in our life due to drinking, or looking at ourselves, our past selves, right? Or whether it's violence, any of those pieces, when we have that strong reaction arise, that's the superpower. And that's why the nervous system is so important, right? The superpower is to be able to be like, have that jump, go to jump, and then be like, wait a minute, maybe I should step back from this for a second. You know, if you put in the business sense, when you go to answer that email aggressively, whatever it is, right? But you take that, you set yourself that boundary, that little 30-second window, 2-minute window, 2-hour window sometimes to go back to it. That's the superpower when we're able to observe that in ourselves.
I love that, man. I want you to let people know what you're up to, because I've had a amazing front row seat to seeing your growth. And again, we talk about face value. We talk about people not understanding. Looking from the outside, you know, your move from BC to Ontario and then wanting to uproot your corporate job and go down this path that most people really probably wouldn't understand. And I know that you're more than willing to share, but I know just from a surface level, people might look at that as strange. And that's been a very common theme in this community, is when I talk to people that are in abundance or that are in a good place but want to get to a great place, my first gut reaction, reprogramming from years past, is like, why are you uplifting a good thing? Why are you destroying this really cool situation that you have? It doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, there's so many people out there worse than you. And it never comes from that. It never comes from, well, I know that there's probably 80% of the people that wish they had my position, so I should just be content with that. And that is the ultimate fucking mistake that people can make, is because people don't give a fuck about what you're doing, which is an objective reality, even though in your mind you might say otherwise. People think, if I do this, they're going to judge me for blowing up a bad thing. And then they'll be the first ones there, if it doesn't work out, saying, fucking told you so. But again, if you don't care and you just kind of push it aside and you're like, it doesn't matter. If I try to build something up and it falls down, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do it again. And you kind of almost, you put out their fire of judgment. You put out their fire of their pre-programming and their way of thinking of, fuck, glad I didn't do that. Mike made a huge mistake. I tried to tell him I was that guy. And people take solace in other people's misery, and it doesn't fucking make sense. But what you and Trev and everybody else in our men's group has inspired me to look at my current reality, which is not a bad reality. I've made a lot of strides. I live in a beautiful house. I have an amazing family, an amazing wife and daughter. I have a beautiful backyard I've put a lot of money into, and I've created my sanctuary here. And it really started over the pandemic. But wanting to pivot and shift and alter my life doesn't mean that what I have is bad. It doesn't mean that I'm running from something. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that I'm not appreciative of what I've built. It just goes back to a situation where if I'm not fired up and I'm not fulfilled, and I feel like there's something more meaningful out there for me, maybe if from the outside, it doesn't look like it's more tangible. It doesn't look like it's maybe more profitable, but it's going to just make me feel more fulfilled in joy and happiness and fulfillment and those sorts of things. I need to chase that. I need to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to get to that place. And so long as I'm open and honest with the people around me that support me, everybody else's opinion doesn't matter. Everybody else's perception, it really doesn't matter. And even if they're vindicated in their doubts, and I go somewhere and I'm like, fuck, I made a mistake, and I come back and now I'm renting instead of owning, or I'm in a smaller house instead of a big house, or I'm driving a shittier truck than a nicer truck. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter, because that's their position. And you've done it, man. Like you're well on your way. I know you're at the infancy stage of it. And the word I would use in my circles, and obviously I'm sure of our previous friend circles, and even your current friend circles, is you're pioneering the way. You're one of the first. I know you're not the first in that space, but you're one of the first to really do it from that perspective of, you already have the wife and kids. You already have the career, rather than starting from scratch of, I'm just going to go down this road and now this is my identity. Or I had to lose everything. Maybe I fucked up and I lost my corporate job. No, you're taking a good situation, or even you could call it a great situation. You're tearing it down, starting with a better foundation personally, and then you're building something up. What that looks like, nobody knows. But I love that concept. And I might not be talking very, very clear English here, but basically what we're saying is you're taking what looks to other people an amazing life, tearing it down to do something more fulfilling. People might look at that and say, what the fuck are you doing, Mike? And your smile is bigger than ever because you're like, I'm doing what I need and love to do. So I love that. So I don't know if you want to touch on that kind of that journey and that mindset of what brought you to that. What was the tipping point of knowing you had to go down this journey? And then what is that journey? Fill people in. What are the details?
Yeah, boom. I love that. And ultimately, listen, for me, it comes down to the regret that I would feel of not taking action would be greater than the potential failure that I would face in taking action and what I would learn along the way. At least I went after that little tickle that I've had in my stomach since that day that said, you need to go after this. This is what you're here for. You've been looking for this something. This is it. So many people, we don't create the space within ourselves to even hear that voice, right? We got to do the work and we got to clear space to even hear that voice. And so on this journey, there's just been unlocks along the way, right? Every time is a new threshold. It's a new unlock, right? When you hear the voice, and then it's like, fuck, I could never do that. What do you mean? You've already got this. Your income's already this. You're fine. Why would you do that? Why would you shift anything? What would you, right? And then it's the courage to step outside of that and question yourself and say, well, do you want to be fired up again when you wake up in the morning? Do you want to feel connected to why you're here and your purpose and the alignment of my actions every day? Do I want to feel like my time on this earth is valuable? That what I'm doing today serves who I want to become tomorrow? That I'm chasing fucking adventure. And the word chase is a slippery slope because I'm not constantly looking for that next thing, but it's growth, right? And so, yeah, that's the big piece. I mean, for me, I'm stepping into a world that is in the health and wellness space, right? Of breath work, serving men and women to become better versions of themselves through tools that I've picked up over the last few years, through my healing journey, through just wanting to be better. And knowing that, listen, ultimately in my life, the word connection is what's strongest for me. Regardless of what I'm doing, if it's work I don't even really want to be doing, I'm connected to it. I'm present. I can find the gems within it. I can be fired up about it because of the way that I frame it or the perspective shift, right? So really that's the power and the mission that personally I want to create. So I love that you asked that because, yeah, on the outside, I could not change a thing in my life, and it's great. But for people that have that deeper burning inside them, that they know this can't be it, because listen, there's many people out there that don't have that. I believe it's there within all of us, but haven't uncovered it. They haven't blown air on that little ember that's going to become a fire again. But when you do, the pain of ignoring that is so much greater than the pain of chasing it and failing, because you're going to learn many, many, many lessons along the way. And then guess what? At the very least, you're back where you began, but you know a lot more. So yeah, I don't know if that even answered your question, but that's where I'm headed right now, really is I want to help people become better versions of themselves with breathwork as one of the superpowers and diving into people's traumas and helping them release limiting stories and self-doubt and helping athletes break through blocks and thresholds and walls and just helping people become superhuman ultimately as well. And I can do that as I get more powerful and learn more, just go and finding these tools and I'm bringing them back. I'm saying, man, look at this shiny motherfucking thing I found. Come try it with me, right? And we do the work together. And that's why the people I work with, I'm so heavily invested in, because it's not a paycheck. It's not about that. And it's about human transformation and what people's possibilities are that they just don't realize. And that's, look in the group. We've been connected for how long? Since February? Look at the transformation within our group, right? And we're just scratching the surface of the work we do together. But the foundational pieces is that we're showing up every day for each other. We're keeping each other accountable. We're talking about things that advance our ways of being all the time. And this is shifting our perspective. And ultimately, it's shifting our personality. And when we change our personality, we change our reality, right? So there's that slow and steady shift. So before I start floating up here and keep talking and don't make any more sense, I'll pull it back. But thank you for giving me the space to talk about that, because it's truly what I'm passionate about. And as you said, I'm at the tip of the iceberg right now. I'm just getting started, just getting warmed up, but the energy is amazing. And the people I get to work with, it's an honor for me every time. somebody new comes forth. But it is rare, especially men. It's interesting. Since I've opened up my one-on-one coaching space, men were kind of the people I thought I would work with more, because who I used to be is really my target market. But I'm dealing with more women right now than I am men. And frankly, I'll tell you exactly why, because they're ready to step forward for change versus men that don't want to be vulnerable. They're like, well, I don't want to look at my life. I don't want to. So that's something I also really want to change as well, because I love dealing with everybody, but I see and I feel the need in the space with men.
Yeah, I love it. Why don't you let people know what you're doing specifically? What are some tools that you're leveraging? What are some approaches, or maybe perhaps how do you evaluate people? I know that you offer a free call to anybody that's curious with your new business and your new coaching space. Run that through anybody who might be listening to this and is curious and like, what would that look like? What would that look like for me? Somebody who might be struggling, somebody who's in a good space, wants to get great, somebody who is maybe has tried some of this stuff and hasn't had a good experience before. What would be your tool to kind of seeing and evaluating somebody's position? And it's not always going to be a fit. It's not always going to be a situation where this would work for somebody. You need to have a degree of open-mindedness and a degree of maturity around something like this, and a degree of vulnerability. But yeah, just run people by that real fast, just in case they're curious of reaching out, or if this maybe tickles or ignites that ember inside them. And they're like, man, I wonder what this guy did. I want to know more of his story, or maybe he can help me cultivate my life into what I want to do, which doesn't necessarily mean climbing the ladder you're currently on. Maybe it means jumping the fuck off that ladder and going up a different one, right? Like, sometimes they just need that nugget. So, just give people a little bit of a summary as to what that would look like with Mike.
Appreciate it, brother. Yes. And truly, as you said too, it's not for everybody. Okay. I meet everybody where they're at, because I can get hella spiritual, I can get energetic, but if we're not there, we're not there. Where are you at? And so the initial piece, when I talk with anybody, and as you mentioned, I'll talk to anybody for free because I'm fired up about it. And if I can offer you some wisdom in that 30 minutes, which I've done many times, I'm happy. That's a win for me, because that's going to create a ripple at some point. Right. So, but really what we do together is we do a full life assessment. Like, we look at every part of your life. What are you doing right now, day to day? What are your vices? What are your virtues? What are your values? And really get a bird's eye view of things. And if you don't have certain things like values and that foundation built, we can build that too. Right. And then, as anybody does, we want to look at where you're currently challenged, where there's goals and what those goals are. We do a full time audit. What are you doing from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed? And then one of the tools we use, which we're using in the inner circle, is we use a habit tracker. So we start with some foundational items that you show up for every single day. And we build on that and we slowly stack. So I also, in the human performance space, have spent a lot of time in the habits realm and how to really implement habits in your life in a simple, easy, digestible way. And so we do that as well. Yeah, then it's looking for where we need. Everybody's going to be different, and breathwork is one of my superpowers. So be prepared to dive deep. I'll say that, because it's about getting to know each other on a really, really deep level. And that's why I think some men have a problem, but a lot of men are ready to step forward. And it's exciting when we do, because it's lifting the veil and it's opening wide and saying, here's where I'm at. I don't even know where I want to go, but I want to feel this. That's how vague it can be in the beginning. But here's what I know is I'm ready to take action. Okay. So that's the important part, is I've had many conversations where people are just curious. And frankly, we decided it's not the right time. But when someone stands in front of me and they say, fuck yeah, I'm ready to go, I want to take action tomorrow. Cool. Here's my different offerings. Now, I have an offering where we work one-on-one. We have an hour call every single week. We chat on WhatsApp. We do one breathwork journey a month. You also get some recordings of meditations, breathworks, things like that. There's foundations. And then I have some offerings that if you don't need that personal touch, that accountability, which I recommend everybody has, but they're more self-led. Okay. And then I have pure breathwork offerings. If you're just curious to breathwork, we do some group stuff. We dive deep. If you're not sure and you're just curious and you're a man, unfortunately, we haven't expanded into women yet, but we have a space on Facebook called the Better Man Community as well. Ultimately, reach out, because in my realm as well, if it hasn't become clear, I'm passionate on just helping people. And in my world I've created over the past however many years, I have many contacts and I pass along people all the time. If it's going to strike me that I think someone can be more powerful than me in your life, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to say, go reach out to this person. You guys need to connect, because there are people with different superpowers. and different gifts. And it's important that there's alignment in this space. And that's why I don't think there's any competition in this space. We might have people that are doing the same thing, but you really need to connect authentically with whoever you're working with, or it's not going to work. If you don't feel it in the pit of your stomach and they don't fire you up and you don't get the warm and fuzzies on the conversation, don't do it. There's many out there. Okay. And that's why I just love that initial conversation, because I can read it very, very well. I'm an intuitive, and I love to find people that either we connect or I'm like, no, you're perfect for so-and-so. Go chat with them. So yeah, I'll stop it there. But for men, the Better Man community on Facebook, or guys, just reach out to me, and I would love to share any wisdom that I have for wherever you're at in your journey.
Nice, man. I love that. And your personal brand, Conscious Creator, do you have a website, socials, anything that people can find you on? Where can people find Mike?
Yeah, thank you, brother. My website is consciouscreator.world, or where I'm most active, and I post about a lot of my events and things like that, is on Instagram at the Conscious Creator Coach. But Instagram is really where I share a bunch of the stuff.
Yeah. And I've been an amazing recipient of some amazing breathwork experiences. It's been super cool. Anything from Wim Hof to your own personal touch to Cam's somatic style. It's crazy, man. People might think that, oh, what is breath work? And it'll fucking change your life. It'll absolutely fucking change your life. And even if you don't get the crazy experiences, like I had hallucinations, I had weird experiences. I passed out once. It was in a very safe way. I didn't hurt myself or anything like that. And they warn you ahead of time that it can get extreme if you've never done it before. But it's super cool to something as simple as feeling the heartbeat in your fingers, and you can just feel your body. Yes. You get so in touch with your body. It's just so cool. So I love that, man. So I appreciate the time and space today, man. You're a beautiful human, a beautiful person, an amazing coach. You got so much positive on the go. I can't speak highly enough about you when I talk to friends and family and even acquaintances that are asking me what I'm doing these days. The proof is in the pudding, man. And like you said, it's not for everybody, but for those that it is for, it's a fucking game changer. So I appreciate you, man, as a friend, as a brother, as a previous acquaintance to what we do now, everything about it. I couldn't be happier, man. So thank you so much for everything you do for me, for the other men in our community and other people that I may not even know who you work with. I'm sure that they can speak the same. You're a great person, man. And I appreciate you a ton.
Thank you, brother. That is deeply received. And I really appreciate it, and appreciate you creating this space for different conversations. And it's an honor to be a part of it. And man, I'm so excited to see where our journey goes together, to know where it came from and where we're at now. There's nothing but excitement, and yeah, tons of love for you, brother.
Appreciate that, man. Well, till next time, we'll leave it at that. Thanks again, man.
Cheers, brother.
Well, that's it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening to the Unmodern Podcast. If you like what you heard and want to hear more, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Also like and follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Unmodern Podcast. Do you have suggestions for future guests, or if you're interested in being a guest yourself, please visit unmodernpodcast.com. Thank you again, and we'll see you in the next episode.